Russia is a vast country full of mystery and magic. From its frozen tundra to its vibrant cities, it is a land of extremes. But few know that at the turn of the 20th century, Russia was a giant in turmoil. The Romanov dynasty had ruled for over 300 years, but cracks were forming. While the nobility lived in luxury, millions of peasants suffered in poverty. Discontent brewed in the streets. And one day in 1917, it all boiled over. He believed that it was the duty of the people to serve the state and not the other way around. This attitude led to widespread discontent among the Russian populace, which only grew worse when World War I broke out. A revolution erupted, toppling the monarchy and sending shockwaves across the globe. Of course, Alexandra was overjoyed and immediately invited Rasputin to come and live in the palace. She hoped that he would be able to cure her son, and many members of the court were happy to welcome him, as he was seen as a source of hope and healing. To make matters worse, Nicholas was forced to spend most of his time at the front lines, leaving the day-to-day affairs of the empire in the hands of his wife, Alexandra. Nicholas was taken to a remote palace, where he spent the next 3 years under house arrest. It was during this time that he began to realize the error of his ways. He also worked hard to improve relations with Germany and France in hopes of securing their support in case another war broke out. With the military in shambles, the economy in free fall, and the people growing angrier by the day, it seemed as though the end of the Romanov dynasty was inevitable. But it was too late. Rasputin had already wormed his way into the hearts, but sadly, this was not the case. Just a few months after he abdicated, he and his family were arrested by the Bolsheviks and thrown into a cold, dark prison. He tried to resist, but it was to no avail. They woke them up, forced them to stand against the wall, and shot them dead. And when they found that Nicholas's little daughter Anastasia was still breathing, they finished her off with their bayonets. Nicholas, Alexandra, their 5 children, along with 4 of their servants, were all killed instantly. And on March 1917, he was forced to sign away the Romanov legacy, ending 300 years of royal rule in Russia. When he was finally allowed to return to the palace, he was a changed man. He was humble, meek, and repentant. Some say it was just another example of the brutality and ruthlessness of the Bolshevik regime. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more historical tales. What do you think? Would you have done anything differently as Nicholas II? Let us know in the comments. Others believe that it was specifically ordered by Lenin as an insurance policy in case Nicholas's popularity led to a counter-revolution, and he immediately set about trying to repair the damage that he had done to his empire. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized Nicholas II and his family as martyrs. And was he behind the downfall of the Romanov dynasty? What do you think? Share your thoughts below. However, he was also a man who was trying to atone for his past mistakes and make things right for his people. He was a tragic figure who was doomed from the start, a man who was born into a life of luxury and privilege, but who ultimately had to suffer the same fate as the commoners he so desperately wanted to help. But even after 100 years, there are still many unanswered questions surrounding their deaths and minds of the Russian nobility, and they were furious when Nicholas tried to banish him from the empire. But Nicholas's brave facade was shattered on the night of July 17, 1918, when he and his entire family were brutally murdered by a firing squad. But why did this happen? What led to the downfall of the Romanov dynasty? For example, while Nicholas was away at war, Alexandra left the management of the empire in the hands of a mysterious figure named Grigory Rasputin. Rasputin was a self-proclaimed holy man who had gained a reputation for being able to heal the sick and save the dying. And Alexandra was desperate to save her son, Alexei, who was suffering from a rare blood disease called hemophilia. Despite the terrible conditions, Nicholas remained strong for the sake of his family. He knew that if they lost hope, they would never make it out of prison alive. And when the Tsar decided to ignore these claims, Rasputin's supporters launched a smear campaign against him, accusing him of being unfaithful to his wife and neglecting his duties as a monarch. And unfortunately, Nicholas's enemies in the court were only too happy to believe these rumors. To answer these questions, we must go back to the beginning. His father, Alexander III, realized that Nicholas had no desire to rule and tried everything he could to change his mind. Nicholas Alexandrovich Romanov was a complex man. He was a devout Christian who tried to live by the teachings of Jesus Christ, but he was also a stubborn and inflexible ruler who was often blind to the needs of his people. He was a man of contradictions. But Nicholas was adamant. He even threatened to give up his life if his father forced him to accept the throne. Eventually, Alexander III gave up and agreed to let his younger son George take the throne. Instead, Nicholas would marry a German princess named Alexandra Fyodorovna and live a comfortable life as a member of the Romanov family. We must meet the last Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II. Nicholas Alexandrovich Romanov was born in 1868. Unlike his father, Alexander III, Nicholas was not fond of the trappings of power. As a young boy, he preferred to spend his time hunting and playing with his toy soldiers, rather than studying the intricacies of statecraft. He loved his country, but he never wanted the Tsar. In fact, when he was just 16 years old, Nicholas wrote to his father that if he became monarch, he would immediately abdicate in favor of his younger brother. But fate had other plans for Nicholas. In 1894, Alexander III died, and Nicholas found himself in a position he never wanted, the leader of the Russian Empire. For example, Nicholas was well aware of the poverty and suffering that plagued his empire, but he did little to alleviate it. The war was a disaster for Russia. The military was ill-equipped, the soldiers were poorly trained, and the economy was in sharp decline. Now, Alexandra was a kind-hearted woman who genuinely cared about her people. But she was also a weak leader who was easily influenced by others. When Alexei accidentally cut himself and started bleeding profusely, Alexandra reached out to Rasputin for help. And amazingly, the bleeding stopped almost instantly after he arrived. However, Nicholas wasn't too keen on having Rasputin around, and he soon began to realize that the so-called holy man was nothing more than a manipulative and power-hungry charlatan. Things came to a head when Rasputin accused Nicholas of trying to poison him. They convinced Alexandra that Nicholas was plotting to have Alexei poisoned so that he could take the throne, and she ordered the guards to arrest him. He grew a beard and long hair, donned simple robes, and spent his days reading the Bible and praying. He introduced sweeping reforms that made him popular among the people. But Nicholas's efforts were in vain. In 1914, World War I erupted and Russia was plunged into chaos. And Nicholas's worst fears were confirmed in February 1917, when the people of St. Petersburg rose up and demanded his abdication. Many thought that Nicholas would now live a long and happy life in exile. The family was separated, with Nicholas and Alexandra being sent to a remote location in Siberia, while their children were sent to a different location altogether. So he told his wife and children that they were just going on a long vacation and that soon they would be back in the palace living the life they once had. It was a dark and stormy night, and the family was asleep when a group of Bolshevik soldiers broke into their prison cell. To make matters worse, the soldiers then returned to the prison to make sure that none of them had survived. No one knows what exactly motivated the soldiers to carry out this heinous crime. Whatever the truth may be, the murder of the Romanov family remains one of the most tragic episodes in human history. Did Rasputin really have a hold over the royal family? How much did he influence their decision to enter World War I? Nicholas II is remembered as a weak and ineffective leader who was unable to save his empire from collapse. His death marked the end of Imperial Russia and the beginning of one of the bloodiest chapters in human history. Thank you for watching.